And I've always been drawn to the notion of sacred geometry. And it has been a great pleasure to have met Dan Winter and many other teachers along the way. But as I was saying to somebody just a few days ago, when they asked, how did you learn first about sacred geometry, it really had a feeling that it was more a remembering. And that's not trying to elevate it into some pseudo-spiritual level. It's really a case that this is our very nature, our very essence. This is how we operate best. This is how we operate our biology, or how rather our biology creates and operates us. And an understanding of how this comes together, a complete understanding, I think, is quite impossible while we're still locked in separating consciousness and while we're still trying to view the world through our own mind. But nevertheless, we can certainly develop a useful understanding that allows us to have real tools to affect positive change in our life. So a little diagram I just mentioned, or just drew yesterday, is a simple spiral into center. And what has been our experience on so many occasions is that this information doesn't tend to follow a linear path. Once I have on that understanding, we'd go to this one, then to this one, and so on. It seems much more sporadic. And quite often you can get an overall sense of something quite early on, and then the spiral just seems to become more obvious, more prominent, more obvious. The words and the expressions we use become more balanced and more appropriate. We get a context. So this little image, if we can imagine spokes, like spokes on a wheel, coming into play, all leading into center. Each of these could be viewed as a new concept that we mightn't have heard before, a new language even, a new expression. And when we begin today, now, there will be an expression that we hear perhaps for the first time. Don't panic is what I'm saying. You know, literally just relax with that. We'll move and get another one and another one. And as I was mentioning yesterday, we hopefully have a tea break or a coffee break at some point and then continue. So by the time we just do one spiral, we notice that we're hitting the same concept again. And the second time there will be greater context for it. Greater understanding will result. And so on and so forth. And along with this as a notional map, a mind map for how we develop understanding and awareness of this information, we'll also be doing a lot to ground the information not just into our heads but into our bodies. To work how to, we'll do some exercises towards, certainly on Monday, and we'll see how we're doing on Sunday evening or Sunday afternoon, to work with how this technology of life can become manifest and come into great focus in how we prepare and consume food, how we relate to each other, how we detect magnetic fields, as it were, how we can move and work with the flow of energy in spaces. And that's what really gets fun when it becomes so much more than just a series of rules and regulations. It becomes a really alive science of living. We will be balancing left and right brain. We will be looking at many left brain concepts, but certainly trying to bring those into balance by showing lots of right brain images, geometries, little movies, and we've got a lot on the computer when it does develop a working relationship with Mercury. So there's a fun, because we're going to be touching a lot on the nature of perception, because how we perceive the world, of course, leads to how we behave in it and how we interact with the world. So just as a little bit of fun, just place both hands out in front, facing inwards. Okay. Just clap. Okay, now turn your hands stretched out and backwards, so your thumbs are facing down. Okay, and put your right arm up. Right arm, right arm, right arm. Okay, very good. And then come around and join. So your thumbs are facing down and your fingers at the front. And now straighten up. Okay. So that would be on video probably, so you could pay Roger to play it back at some way. What happened there? No. It's a playful exercise in just looking at perceptions and how we can so easily be misled by what we think is going on. So, so it's a fun way to just see how we get misdirected. And what this misdirection, of course, can be used to, in a not very wholesome way. you know, to convince people of something or to try and project a belief system or something. So what we try to do, and the expression that Roger would use, I would endorse, the non-credo, that this is not based on a belief system. We desperately seek to try and get to a pure principle understanding of what's going on that can be applied and tested, and the feedback will hopefully bring everything back into, I see the word focus there, back into some focus. Do you want to know how I did that? Yeah? Okay. Again, misdirection. The hands were together, went like this. I told everyone to put their right hand up. And usually in a group of people, somebody may well put their left hand up by accident or whatever. But they don't have to. But what I did, if you noticed, because this was the last piece of movement, your attention was focused on this. So with my other hand, I went, okay, left hand, no, that's okay, great. But instead of bringing it back there, I just brought it back like this. And when I joined that, it's just a simple turnaround. You know? So it's not a magical contortion trick. It's just showing how when we increase our perception, and we're going to touch upon that a lot because recently I've really been, because the idea of biologic architecture that supports biology, literally. So it seemed to make sense to me to study the most fundamental aspect of life, which is the human cell. Any cell, actually, just a cell. And when we look at the principles of how a cell works, we can apply that to how a multicellular organism works and how a whole society works. And it has been a profound source of great inspiration. And we'll touch upon that certainly later on today. You can get a sense of what's ahead. When we see the principles governing how perception at the level of a cell is exactly relating to how we perceive as multicellular organisms calling themselves humans.